Welcome to Realcast, the weekly roundup of the real asset markets. I'm joined by Dan Innes and Nicole Dines. Nicole, let's start with you. What were some of the key kind of themes you were watching over the headlines this week?
Well, Real Asset Media held a briefing in person as well as online on logistics, and we all know logistics had an amazing run in the last few years, but the news is that it looks set to continue despite all the new headwinds and geopolitical issues that we know about. According to Savills figures, in 2021, take-up reached 40 million square meters in Europe, which is a record, and also investment volumes set a new high of 62 billion euros. But the good news is that this year, in the Q1, they reached a new record as well. The first 3 months of the year, it reached 10 million square meters of leases were signed. The reason is that there's a more diverse range of occupiers. So the Amazon factor was no longer there. The last 2 years, the world's largest online retailer accounted for 25% of all take-up in Europe. This quarter, it was only 3%. So sort of Amazon is sort of almost out of the picture, but yet it reached a new record in Q1, which means that there are a lot of other occupiers there keen to take up space, which is obviously very healthy for the market. And the vacancy rates are at record lows, 3.3% in continental Europe and 2.8% in the UK, and they're trending downwards according to Savills. Obviously, there are headwinds, inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues, but Kevin Mofid of Savills pointed out that even these can have a silver lining for the logistics sector, because for a start, these challenges have the potential to depress the level of development as you would expect in the sector, given the demand, which will obviously have a beneficial effect, keeping rents very high. And he thinks that even current forecasts of rent increases are way undervalue the market, that rents will keep on rising a lot more than expected. And online retail, of course, continues to be the main driving force behind the success of logistics. And the forecasts were that in Western Europe would reach 25% of total retail sales by 2025. Now, according to Savills, that might be pushed back a bit to 2026, 2027 because of the headwinds we were mentioning, but they would definitely get there because the trend is up. And also, apart from online retail, the trend for onshoring and rising inventory levels, that's also a real positive for logistics because it creates additional demand. So a few problems on the horizon, but definitely still very much a success story. Another two stories, I always try to keep an eye on ESG matters. There's a really interesting story from the UK, from a London-based company called Satellite View, which is an infrared imaging specialist, and it's going to send satellites into space to gather data. It's signed up 2 deals, one with Elon Musk, with SpaceX, to gather this data, which is then going to give to Landmark Information Group, which is a leading provider of data to the UK land and property sector. So the companies will have real data on what their emissions are from these thermal images, and we'll be able to make informed decisions on how to deal with emissions. Obviously, the objective is to dramatically reduce emissions, but based on data, we've often said how important data are in the whole ESG picture. So this is a significant step forward and a sort of real innovation. On another sort of positive story for the environment is KGAL, which has been very active in Italy already in the solar parks sector, has just been given the green light for 3 more large-scale projects in Lazio and Sicily, bringing the total capacity for the company in Italy to over 1.2 gigawatts. And Italy, they say it's a great market because the electricity prices are higher than in the rest of Europe. So there's a great demand. Also, there's a lot of sun, radiation is optimal. And also, more recently, the government is giving real incentives. They want to generate more green energy, and the target is to go from current 20% to 30% of total energy production being green by 2030. So the KGAL said that as well as being a potentially great market, it's also making it a lot easier for investors like them because approval procedures have become much simpler and faster.
That focus on the energy side is really interesting. Quite a bit of news around that. There was some news also from ASR Real Estate in terms of investing in the energy transition, and we'll also be having a couple of sessions at Provada this week focused on ESG. So it'll be interesting to track that. But I saw also Inca investing 190 million in renewable energy in Poland, BlackRock committing 200 million to UK-wide green energy storage. I noticed as well on terms of the logistics side, interesting research came out this week as well from CBRE, just saying that occupiers in the logistics space are now more willing to pay a green premium when looking at new facilities. Around 2/3 of those surveyed said they would pay a rent premium for facilities with a green certificate. So interesting to see that. And I thought as well the discussion around particularly the pricing and the yield there in terms of the investment capital market side for logistics was interesting, with ongoing negotiation at the moment and a transition in terms of pricing because of the sort of increase in interest rates and the comparative risk premium there. But interestingly, also to see Panattoni expanding with a debut into Sweden with 7 sites for 300 million. So lots of activity in both of those markets. Dan, what have you been following?
Well, there's been lots of activity, like you say, Richard. The famous Camden Market in London has been put up for sale. Israeli billionaire Teddy Sagi hopes to get bids of around £1.5 billion. And that's for that endless warren of stalls, bars, venues and housing that make up that really sort of seminal, historic, sort of countercultural venue in North London. Then following on from that monumental Student Roost acquisition last week, the chief exec of Greystar, he shrugged off worries about Britain's economy after signing that, one of the biggest property deals in UK history, and certainly one of the biggest since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Bob Faith, he predicted that the company is going to expand more into the UK after that deal. And that was with the Singaporean sovereign wealth fund GIC. Elsewhere in the market, when we're seeing so many joint ventures and collaborations at the moment, a pretty significant one is Milligan. They've joined forces with Urban Splash to find UK regeneration projects that are going to benefit from their combined expertise. On the sustainability front, Invesco has targeted €1 billion for its first European real estate debt fund in that sector. And unlike most private debt funds, the strategy is going to be open-ended to provide greater liquidity to investors. But that fund's going to sort of prioritize lending on sustainable assets, and borrowers' business plans are going to need to demonstrate a real focus on sustainability, whilst the development loans are going to focus on assets that meet a real kind of best-in-class set of principles from that team. That fund already completed its first transaction. They provided a senior loan facility to finance a pipeline of 6 French and Spanish logistics facilities, which are already pre-let to an online retailer. But that ESG focus is really sort of coming to the fore once again. And then last but not least, it was the week of the Property Week Property Awards at Grosvenor House. There was a great turnout there, and that some of the winners included Acre Capital Real Estate in the Regional Agency of the Year category, and Fabrics also won the coveted Developer of the Year award. They're the property investor and developer helping sort of in a more of a sustainable space. And in the past, we've also talked about some of their really sort of iconic projects that they've got on the go at the moment, like Roots in the Sky.
Really interesting, I think, to see some of that activity. You mentioned there the residential side as well. And I noticed that Anne Kavanagh recently, of course, Chief Investment Officer at Patrizia, has been named Chief Executive Officer effective 25th of July at Telford Homes, which of course was bought by Trammell Crow at the end of 2019. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that's going to be a significant expansion, both in terms of the UK, but also across Europe, just as Trammell Crow has done in the logistics sector. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week for our regular roundup of the week in real assets.